who tune in can also watch it.
Excellent.
Go ahead, buddy.
All right. Just real quick, give me a thumbs up if you see a slide.
I see Hudson pointing at something, and then you got the binoculars.
That's right. All right. Excellent. Great. You don't see any notes, right?
I see the notes, and I see your really cool logo on the top right-hand corner with birds for eyes.
Wait, you see like the handwritten notes I have?
Oh,
no,
no.
no, we don't see your notes. It's just your first page. You're good.
See, Hudson, I told you. All right. Excellent. So I think we are all set up and ready to go. Awesome. So thank you everyone for joining us today and for having us here. A lot of people want to thank today. I'm very excited for this bird talk today. It's interesting being a birder for as long as I have, and being a teacher, I get to do a lot of presenting and a lot of talking with students of all ages, not just young students like Hudson, but sometimes older students when I'm out birding in the field, so to speak. And it's pretty common to have birders doing a slideshow presentation like this, but what makes this today very exciting is the fact that this is Hudson's very first bird presentation, which I'm excited for that to be an opportunity for you today, Hudson. How are you feeling right now, my friend?
Good.
Great. I'm happy to hear that. However, I'm trying to find where the video went for you real quick. My video has all disappeared for a moment.
Oh, Hudson, you got is that a great blue heron on the front of your website, Hudson?
No, that's an acorn woodpecker.
This guy?
Very nice. All right, well, we're going to get this started here. I think we're ready to rock. So first, I want to thank Synergy Yoga for having us here today, giving us the opportunity to present and talk a lot about the world of birding, something that Hudson and I feel extremely passionate about. I want to thank specifically Jen Moore, Hudson's mother, for doing so much to put this talk together, her amazing eye for graphic design, and also, she was kind of the person that really came to us with this idea in the first place. So kind of giving us a new challenge to try something new is really exciting. So Jen, thank you for that. I got to send a special shout out to the Garnet Valley people, especially to Jenny Southmaid and Meg Hayes, who spend a lot of time like myself on Zoom. So the fact that you're taking part of your day off to spend more time on Zoom today means a lot to us. So thank you for joining us today. And when it comes to birding, there's so many facets to the world of birding and bird watching and birds themselves. Birds themselves are a topic that everyone knows something about. But one of the things I think that's so fascinating about birds themselves is that there's so much more than meets the eye when you look at them. Of course, we see their beauty, and if you're lucky, you get to see their behavior, but the secret life or the discovery of bird life that is even still ongoing today makes birding such a fascinating and interesting thing. And thinking about current events and thinking about health and wellness, currently now in the pandemic especially, spending time outside provides so much positivity for people. And I would argue that when it comes to birding, that birding gets the most bang for your buck when it comes to spending time outside. That no matter how you spend time outside, there's no wrong way to do it. But if you really focus on the world of birding, I think that birding provides endless opportunities for people when it comes to exploring and learning about the outdoors and learning about the natural world. So hopefully today, Hudson and I can tell you all about the great world of birding. So before we talk even more about that, what do you say we spend a little time talking about ourselves here, Hudson, shall we?
Yes. Okay. Hi, my name is Hudson. I am a bird watcher. I am 10 years old, and I birding since I was 8 years old. I live in Pennsylvania with my parents, 3 sisters, 2 dogs, cat, and a bunny. I also love fishing, football, and golf. I document birds with my Sony a6000 camera. My favorite place to bird is John Hines, which is in Philadelphia. I use a system called eBird to record all of my findings. And my life list is 194 species.
Hey, Hudson, what's a life list? People might not know what that means. Can you tell people about that?
So a life list is a list of every bird that you've seen in your life.
Excellent. And when it comes to birding, a life list is really important for people. People who bird, many people keep lists of all sorts of stuff, but especially like a life list, the first time you see a bird in your life, that's a really important thing for somebody. So 194 species is pretty cool. Hudson, do you have a life list goal in your future?
I want to get to 6,000.
Wow.
My goodness. Wow. So I liked how Hudson introduced himself. So I actually copied his and just changed his information to my own stuff here. So my name is Brian Quindlen, but my friends call me BQ. I'm a bird watcher, but I'm also a 4th grade teacher where my students call me Mr. BQ. I live in Philadelphia with my wife, and similar to Hudson's interests, my personal interest outside of birding is music. I'm an avid musician. Used to play in a band many years ago. I'm an avid guitar collector. I buy, sell, and trade guitars all the time. It's like my other obsession outside of birding. And although I'm 33 years old, I've been birding since I was a student, like Hudson's age. So when it comes to birding, this is something I've been doing for most of my life. And before I was even a teacher in my own classroom, I coached students in competitive birding for almost 10 years. Now you might say, competitive.
Brian, can you tell us a little bit about competitive birding?
Yes, I absolutely will. In fact, when it comes to the competitive birding, I have a section about that coming up here. So the competitive birding was something I got to coach students in before I had my own classroom. And I know it sounds kind of silly, competitive birding, but I'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah.
Like Hudson's camera, I document birds with my Canon 7D Mark II camera, and I have a 400 millimeter lens. I put the specs on there for any camera types out there. But my other passion here, is everything good, by the way?
Perfect.
Great. Sorry, I can't see the video of other people, so I'm just hoping that's all going well.
I think there is a drop down in the top right where you can move the grid, but
yeah, when I put it in presenter mode, for some reason that disappeared. So
okay. Well, we can see you perfectly, yeah, and the screen.
Cool. I'm just gonna hope for the best. So my other passion, aside from photography, I love taking videos of birds, but I like to do that with something called digiscoping. It's kind of a weird thing, but I actually have an adapter for my iPhone that I can put it into a case and then put my iPhone on my binoculars or on my telescope. And I take photos and videos of birds through that, which is how I make some of the content I put on Instagram and YouTube as kind of a low budget way to make bird videos and kind of get a chance to show people about nature on my own time. One of my favorite places includes John Hines, which we're going to talk a bunch about here today, in Philadelphia. Another place called Exton Park in the town of Exton, for those who are in Pennsylvania, and also Cape May, New Jersey, one of the best birding hotspots out there. Like Hudson, I use a system called eBird to record all the findings of birds I see. And my life list is 621 species. So I've been birding for a very long time, and 621 is a lot of birds. But the reality is there are thousands of birds to see all over the world. And most of my travels for birds have been strictly within the United States. But one of the best things about birding is that it's something that can take you as close or as far as you want to go. So Hudson, what do you say we talk a little bit about what birding is for people?
Sure.
So people ask me this question all the time because I say birding and they're like, whoa, wait a second. How is bird a verb? Well, birding is something that is synonymous with bird watching, but people who are really into birding might argue that birding is a little more than bird watching. The Webster's Dictionary definition says that birding is the observation of birds in their natural habitats as a hobby, which could be bird watching, like sitting in your backyard at your bird feeder, could be, around neighborhood parks and preserves. anywhere in the world. A lot of my friends who are really into birding say that birding itself is a whole lot more than just bird watching, that birding is a lot about the chase, which I'll explain what I mean by the chase in a moment. But it's a pretty physical activity when you're birding versus maybe sitting on your back deck enjoying birds. No matter what, there's no wrong way to enjoy birds. And birding itself is growing hugely in popularity. In a recent study published in 2016 by the US Fish and Wildlife Service, over 45 million people identified themselves as bird watchers, and $75 million were spent due to birding and wildlife watching.
Wow.
So when you think about the economic impact, people always love to talk dollars and cents. And the reality is, you can build neighborhoods all you want. You can build baseball fields and sports complexes everywhere. But when you leave areas for passive recreation, like going out and enjoying nature, you will see a return on your investment if you treat the land right and you respect the nature and natural resources of your area. And birding is something that brings people from all walks of life. You get youngins, old people, you get people who are in finance, you get people who are in people in uniform, you get people who are first responders, you get people of any career, every career it seems. There's people in birding that come from different worlds. And I feel like that's one of the exciting things about it. And then another exciting thing, birding is an endless scavenger hunt. Would you say that's fair to say, Hudson?
Yeah.
An endless scavenger hunt. And there's so many ways that you can really calculate the scavenger hunt of birding. But, when Hudson and I think about birding, this is kind of a scene that we would think about. A lot of people with scopes and binoculars. Birding is an action, an activity. And, I found it kind of very refreshing to sit and start with a nice slow breath today before we started this, because yesterday I was being mindful of my breath on top of this mountain after I'd hiked up about a mile up the side of this thing. I was catching my breath. That sometimes birding requires that you have to put a lot of physical activity in. Sometimes you're going hiking long distances or spending a day on the beach, walking on sand. It's a great physical activity. So birding really is not just the act of looking at birds. It's the excitement and the energy that birds can bring. For instance, good looking birds like northern cardinal. This is a bird that you can see in Pennsylvania 365 days out of the year if you want. This is a species that doesn't migrate from our area. They stay, they hang out, and they're an incredibly beautiful bird that I would say us birders take for granted because we're not out looking at just cardinals all the time, but they're everywhere whenever we go out birding. But a lot of folks that come from out of the area that see northern cardinal for the first time, their minds are often blown. So I feel like when it comes to birding, we have to think about, not taking things for granted, because some of the most beautiful birds right here in our own backyards. You don't even need to go that far to see a northern cardinal, at least in Pennsylvania. But birding happens, like I said before, 365 days of the year. Any time of year you can go out. And sometimes it's all about the timing. For instance, in the springtime, in spring and summer, you can get beautiful birds like this Baltimore Oriole, which I believe, Hudson, you and I were together when we saw this at John Hines back in the springtime.
Yes.
Is that your picture?
That's my picture, yes.
Cool. Right on.
And we have a lot of Hudson's photography in here that we're going to be jumping to pretty soon. So
Wonderful.
A lot of the pictures that are in this talk today are actually ones I've seen either with Hudson or in the area today.
Right on.
So,
Are you cool with me chiming in and asking you questions as you flow?
yes, I just wish I was able to see your video so I could.
On the right side of your screen, do you see like a row of faces from top to bottom?
No, I don't. Like I use Zoom a lot, so I know how that works. However, like with this presenter mode, the video.
It's all good. I mean, you can jump out of presenter mode if you want. Like what you have clicked right now on view is you can kind of create a different option if you want to see the faces.
Let me try something here.
If that makes it, nicer for you. What I like about this too is that this isn't just a podcast of two people talking on forever, which I personally love podcasts. Ooh, that owl looks cool.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
But it's, it's interactive. So it's really nice. And you guys, we encourage you guys to put any questions on the chat as well. but with the photography, so you're saying that Baltimore Oriole, you saw that with Hudson. Where was that? You mentioned it briefly.
Yeah, Hudson, do you want to tell him about that when we were at John Hines that one day?
Well, that we were at John Hines one day. Mr. BQ he stayed there for about 5-6 hours. He had 101 species.
Oh, wow.
Just in one day. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, but the place was filthy with Orioles.
Yeah, with Orioles. I like that kind of filth. Mr. BQ,
Yes.
how long ago was it that you guys went and saw that Oriole? Like when you saw those 100 and something species, like are different, how long ago was that?
So that was on Saturday, May 3rd this past year.
May 3rd. Okay, so it was like right, kind of like miss the pandemic was starting, right?
Yeah, it was pretty pandemic time to say the least. And one of the things that made that May 3rd such a special day was, like I said before, birding's all about timing.
Yeah.
You know, birds migrate all throughout the spring, but they don't all migrate at once. They migrate at certain times, and they migrate based upon patterns of weather.
Right.
So because the frontal movement the night before was excellent and the timing was right, we had a huge migration of birds going on the 2nd into the 3rd, and it brought a lot of new tired migrating birds overnight to the area. And the looks of birds we had was stellar, and the species diversity was huge. So not only did we have Baltimore Oriole, but same day, we also had an osprey in the same spot.
Wow.
Right over our heads.
Cool. And when you're talking frontal movement, can you kind of tell us what that means?
Yeah. So like weather fronts, you have warm fronts and cold fronts. Believe it or not, weather fronts push birds, and a lot of birds migrate overnight, songbirds especially. So, there's actually a website called Birdcast that we follow, Hudson and I, that kind of tells us the migration forecast for the week during the fall and spring, kind of know what species to expect and what days look like they're going to be really productive mornings to go birding. We actually can plan like our personal schedules around that. Obviously when the school year is going on, it doesn't work out the best, but usually I can get out birding before school. But when you have these frontal movements, myself and a lot of other birders, we really rely upon the information we get from this website, and we kind of know where to go, when to be there, and kind of go from there.
What's that website again? I'm going to plug it in the chat.
It's called birdcast.info. And that's a pretty next level birding tool. You really need to understand like the weather patterns. And honestly, I'm pretty much of a novice when it comes to understanding the weather stuff. Like I have some friends who are like, they're addicted to it. But Hudson, you're a big weather guy, aren't you?
Yep.
So Hudson, I know that, birds are a wonderful indicator for how we're treating the environment. Sometimes you'll see certain birds migrate to a certain area, and if you go a couple of years in a row, and then all of a sudden sometimes you don't see them, or you see a greater population.
Yeah.
That tells you a lot about how that particular ecosystem is being treated. Have you seen any changes in birding from last year to this year? I know, and you've been bird watching for a couple of years now. So can you share a little bit about that, Hudson?
Yes. So last year I feel like was some good migration, but it wasn't like this year. This year was the best migration I've ever seen.
Wow.
I think it was maybe caused by COVID, because not as many people are getting outside. As you can see, there's not as much pollution or trash. So I feel like the birds have felt more comfortable. And COVID has helped the birds. And all this trash and pollution hurts their habitat, but their habitat has been growing this year by a lot because of COVID.
Right. And there is such a thing as noise pollution too, that also affects the birds that we don't think about. Sometimes when we think about pollution, we think just about trash, right?
Yeah.
The noise definitely plays a factor into the birds kind of harmony transition into their migratory pattern. Yeah, thanks for letting me ask a couple of questions to you, Hudson. Mr. BQ, keep flowing. So you saw this osprey, you say, on that same day?
Yeah. I mean, May 3rd was a huge day for us. And I remember just loads of birds, loads of birders, people, of course, keeping their distance from each other. But it's just a day like that is like a day of birding that we're never going to forget, just because there was so much activity and there was a lot of cool stuff to see. And when it comes to the world of birding and the activity of birding, that you can travel and go look for target species specifically too. You can get a pair of binoculars and go out in your backyard and see what you find. But sometimes birds are really picky about where and when they're found. And you kind of have to study where they're found, and you kind of have to understand habitat if you really want to find specific target birds. Like I photographed these harlequin ducks back in March at a place called Barnegat Lighthouse State Park in New Jersey.
Wow, those are majestic.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Like you see a bird like this, and if this doesn't like make you stop and look at birds in a different way, then I don't think anything will. Yeah. So harlequin duck is like a wintering bird you find on the coast, but Hudson, you've even had a chance to photograph some pretty unusual species.
Yes.
Want to tell them about our solitary sandpiper here?
Yes. So this was a bird that stayed in at John Hines for a good month and a half. This photograph I think was taken on the same day we got the osprey and the Baltimore Oriole, May 3rd. Mm-hmm. But this bird was really loved these type of habitat. But it left about a month after it was found there because of the marsh. It all the water got drained out somehow, probably from the heat.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you were to guess where it went?
I would probably think it probably stayed, but into another marshy area, like a mud flat.
Gotcha. Okay.
I love that point you bring up, Hudson, that habitat's key. You get birds that drop in at random spots that don't make sense, but a lot of times birds can be predictable based upon time of year. And again, the habitat being there. And once water like this dries up, it's no use for a solitary sandpiper.
Right.
Yeah.
Hudson, when you go on trips with your mom and with your family, do you take your binoculars with you?
Yeah, always. I need them so I can get better views of the birds, and usually some birders actually will use their lenses right. As like a binocular, but okay. I always need my binoculars.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask you one more question before we keep flowing, because I saw Mr. BQ slightly go into that owl, which I definitely want to hear about.
Wrong button there, but
yeah, I keep kind of going to that owl myself. So when you go on these trips, out of the trips that you've done with your family and you took your binoculars, like which kind of trip sticks out for you the most, like on the family trip, like places that you've gone outside of, where you've seen obviously the most species in Pennsylvania?
Well, North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah, that we've a little later in the presentation we'll be talking about areas I've went to in North Carolina, okay. Which was probably so far a peak in birds in my birding life.
Nice. Cool. Well, I don't want to jump ahead too much. Go ahead, Mr. BQ, keep flowing.
All right. And, earlier Hudson makes the comment about habitat being important, but sometimes birds show up in really random and weird spots that you don't expect, like this bird here, this snowy owl. Hudson and I, we go out and we get rare bird alerts sometimes. We actually get messages from different services, which we'll talk about, and they'll say that there's a rare bird in an area. And, you look for harlequin ducks on the coast in New Jersey in winter because that's predictable. That's where they are. You go look for solitary sandpiper in the marshes in the spring, because that's where they are in the springtime. But then you get stuff that doesn't make sense, like this snowy owl perched on top of a school in Port Richmond in Philly back in February of last year.
Oh, wow. In the city.
In the city, right on a city block. It was on a private, like a Catholic school. Kids were walking out of school and not even noticing the owl perched on the light about 10, 15 feet up from the front door.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. So when I got that rare bird alert, I was over there real quick to see that. And that's just another reason why birding is so great, because a lot of times students always love to ask me, they're like, Mr. BQ, what bird are you most excited to see? And, I sound corny saying it, but it's like the least expected one, that like, it's almost like I can't even predict what the rarest bird is I want to see, because sometimes the wackiest stuff like this happens where a snowy owl shows up 2 miles from my house, and, I got to walk around the city blocks looking up on top of roofs to look for where they might be. And I was lucky enough to get to see this bird with amazing views. Perched right in the.
I can imagine, it's, a lot of like when I started more being attracted to watching birds, it was in cities. I've lived in cities that are like 10 million people, really large cities. And when you look up and you look at a bird, it just totally takes you out of the concrete. And it's so, so beautiful.
Yeah.
It really makes your imagination wander. And then you start thinking about where this snowy owl, like what, where it normally resides and where it normally thrives, and then you start to like, you picture a totally different environment, which is really nice.
Ask Francisco. I'm curious, Mr. DQ or Hudson, what would the natural environment for the snowy owl to be? Like, where are they in the region?
Well, snowy owls, they would actually, they're usually up in Canada, like southernmost Canada, a little bit of New England, but they'll like be straggling down, like you'll get them at the Philadelphia airport sometimes.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, when you think of an owl, you often think of the forest, but there's actually a few species of owl that don't like the forest at all. So a snowy owl, if you think about where they nest, it's up in like the Arctic Circle. And if you're in the Arctic Circle, there's no trees. It's just wide open, flat areas. So a lot of times when snowy owls end up down in our area by accident, they end up in a similar habitat to where they're from. So you don't find them in the woods. You'll find them in a flat, open area like an airport, which sounds strange, but when you think about the comparison of where they nest to the Philly airport, it's actually kind of similar, minus the large flying gas hawks that are taking off all day.
Right. Cool. That's interesting.
Yeah, and then you think about these rooftops in Port Richmond. Obviously, there's like, they're tall buildings, but they're all kind of the same height, and it's kind of a spread out area. It kind of makes me think, how often does this happen? And people don't even know because no one's on the rooftop looking.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff, I think, makes Hudson and I burn to know more,
Yeah, it's nice to look up.
Certainly is. It's well said. So Hudson and I, we're going to talk more about some of our favorite birding stories coming up here, but I think that I want to try to connect Hudson and I right now to how he and I know each other, because, I'm a teacher in our school district. Hudson's a student in our district, but he goes to another school. He's actually not a student at where I teach here. But my very first introduction to Hudson, actually, believe it or not, was through Twitter. This is a tweet here. I actually went and found it the other night from Mrs. Morgan, his third grade teacher, shouting out his website, feathersandchirps.com. And when I saw this initial tweet, I was very surprised, because a lot of times when I'm working with students, they often are coming to me and birding for the very first time. It's very unusual that I have a student that is already a birder and then I get to know them. But I've found over the years that the most tenacious students I've worked with and the ones who stuck with birding the most have been the ones who were already birders before. They even had met me, and they already have like a pretty solid interest in birding. So when I saw Hudson's name come across here and I saw this tweet, I was very surprised and was very curious to know more about Hudson and his website. I remember clicking on it, being very impressed with the photographs. And suddenly I kind of felt like an athletic scout, almost looking to build my team, and was like, man, I got to find out more about this Hudson student who is taking all these great photos here, because this is really unique to find a student who had such a driving and obvious passion at a young age for nature. So I guess one of the things that I want to talk about before we get to some of these stories is my birding background, because one of the things that I think is really important is that word mentorship. That as a teacher, that's kind of part of the deal. When you're a teacher, you're a mentor to students, whether or not that's part of the, it's not necessarily in the job description, but the students look up to you. They look up to how you behave. They look up to how you carry yourself, the way you talk to them, the way you talk to colleagues and other people, that you're a mentor to students. And I was super lucky growing up. I didn't get into birding on my own. I actually got into birding through a mentor that got me interested in nature. So if we go back in time here a little bit, we talk a lot about John Hines. This picture on the right is actually from my very first nature field trip I went on to John Hines in September of 1999. It was the weekend after Hurricane Floyd hit. And for those who have been to John Hines, you'll notice in the background, the beloved big boardwalk has been torn to pieces by the storm and eventually would be rebuilt to what we know as it is today. But this is, on my first visit, I saw the defunct big boardwalk, the old one. It's kind of like a landmark in the bird world. Everyone knows, go to the big boardwalk to look for this. And when I went on this field trip to John Hines, it actually happened because before that, my mom had signed me up for a bluebird box building class. I wasn't doing a whole lot as a young man when I was a student. I wasn't very good at sports. I was in the Scouts, but I wasn't super involved with it. And when I had been signed up for this bluebird box building class, my mom had worked at the Upper Mainline YMCA in Berwyn as a check-in person. She was the greeter that would scan people's cards, and she thought, oh, a nature class, maybe he would like it. Well, I show up to the nature class, and it turns out I'm the only kid signed up for this class. And it's just me and this dude whose name is also Brian. And he was a really nice guy. He was very friendly, and he and I got to build all the bluebird boxes together. And I remember just immediately being drawn to him. I was like, wow, this guy was so nice to me, and he was so cool. Like, I want to go to another one of his activities that he has coming up. So we held another one. And this time,
all the way in the back, Brian, in that picture.
Yeah, so that's me in this picture. And Tara asks me how old I was. This was in 1999, so I was just turned 12 in that picture. So that's me in this picture, and this is the earliest picture I've been able to find of Brian and I together, my mentor that got me into birding and nature. That's Brian there. That's an awkward me holding a Home Depot bucket and a net as we're going to look for fish and other critters in some tide pools at Stone Harbor Point in New Jersey. When we first got into nature, it wasn't just about birding. It was just about general nature. But I remember on this John Hines field trip, seeing my first great blue heron, seeing my first great egret. And it really wasn't until we had another student who joined the club. He was obsessed with birds. And we were all like, whoa, this kid's like really next level with his knowledge. And we were all like very much drawn to him very quickly. His name's Rowan Kenzie, still a very close friend of mine today. And he brought this love of birds to us. And then Brian, our mentor, he started to become a birder himself. And then he started passing his bird knowledge on to us. And it got pretty serious to the point that in 2003, when I made it to high school, we actually competed in the World Series of Birding, a 24-hour bird competition where you have that entire day with your team to find as many different birds as you can throughout the entire state of New Jersey. So it sounds pretty silly and sounds kind of funny, but and this isn't going to help matters either. If you go onto the Daily Show's website, they actually did a report from the World Series of Birding in 2001 or 2002, where Steve Carell tagged along with a World Series of Birding team to see the competition. It's a pretty funny clip, but for us, it was very serious. We weren't very good back in this picture. This was in 2003. So I was a freshman in high school, and we did our very first World Series of Birding. We had, you can see my mentor, Brian, on the left was our main coach. And then it was the rest of our teams. It was the white shirts, the Kestrels. We were the high school team. The gray shirts, the front, they were the middle school team. And this little fellow, Rowan Kenzie, on the right in the gray shirt, he was the student that got all of us really interested in birding. And I love this picture on the bottom left. You can see I have my analog camcorder that I brought with me to go birding that day. So actually, I still have that camcorder video of us and my first World Series of birding in my awkward teenage years. Part of me wants to kill it with fire, but the other part of me also just loves to see the innocence and inexperience, but how much fun we had on our very first World Series of birding. And we didn't do very well. We had 113 species that day. But Brian, being our amazing coach year after year, got us really set up for success, really showing us the birds, taking us around different locations. And you can see the club of kids was growing, and we were all growing up together. And then by the time I got to be a senior in high school, this was in May of 2006, I'm there on the right, we actually ended up getting around 170, I'm trying to remember what exactly, but we were in the 170s of species that year for our team, which for us was like, we couldn't believe it. We were so happy with that. And a lot of that was from Brian's great teaching that he did to get us excited and into birding. So the story continues. When I graduated high school, I actually played in a band and did some traveling for a while. And when I came back from that and went back to school, I ended up taking over the birding program from Brian and becoming the teacher for it. So there's Brian on the left in this bottom left-hand picture and me on the right. My very first year as coach for that group of students there, called ourselves the Duck, 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 Duck Brant. It's a bird joke. A Brant's a goose. But anyway, that was my very first year coaching the team in 2008. And my first opportunity really to be a leader with the students after Brian had kind of guided me on how to do it. I became the coach. And then if you look there in that bottom picture of me standing next to that mop top fellow, Ben, pretty amazing to look. This is in 2008. A short 5 years later, Ben ended up being the team captain of the first youth team to ever win the World Series of birding, beating every team, including the adults. So really proud moment for us, for our organization there. And you can see Brian's there on the left. He was there for all of it. You know, at that point, he actually has been climbing the corporate ladder, and now he's in charge of the whole YMCA. He started as a lifeguard there and then became a nature instructor. He now runs the whole facility. He's the boss there. But as he climbed the ladder, I kind of became the person who would mentor the students. And not only did Brian teach me so much about how to be a teacher, but he handed me a youth program where I got to engage students, not just with birding, but with nature. And we got to grow this program called Earth Service Corps, where we went out birding, we went out canoeing, kayaking, camping, all sorts of crazy field trips. And I got to connect with students in a way in which I never even expected, in such a huge way. And it also brought together just this birding family and just so much fun and so many amazing experiences. In fact, earlier I pointed out that first World Series of birding, in the back in the same gray shirt, Rowan Kenzie, the kid that got us into birding, is there. Ben, the team captain of the winning team, in this picture, he's a junior in college coming back for a reunion team that we did. And then you can also see myself in the front, my mentor, Brian, in the back. And now I actually have a former student that I used to teach for birding that now she runs the YMCA program and she's the teacher now. So we actually have 3 generations of teacher all together in this one picture, all because of this World Series of birding. So when my wife and I got married on July 4th, 2019, there was nobody better to do the wedding ceremony than Brian, a guy who has been here for me time and time again and has always done so much to just be a great mentor and teacher, not just for birds, but for so many other things. So when it comes to birding, it's a whole lot more than just the birds. And my story of how I became a birding mentor, it's a long one, I know. And I thank you all for kind of sitting through that as I talked about it. But I think it's important to explain the connection with Hudson in that, you know, I was also a student that started the same way. I had an interest in birds and nature. And it wasn't until I met someone that showed me about the natural world and taught me that if not for those things, I don't know where I'd be today. And I certainly wouldn't be the teacher I am without him. So this is one of the reasons why I bird. But Hudson, why don't we talk about some of the reasons why you bird? Enough about me.
Okay. Well, I love birds because, I love the bird because of their natural beauty. There are different notes in their songs and their colorful feathers, which I love. I actually collect them. But I photograph birds so I can capture their natural beauty and to study them through a lens. By looking at my photos, it helps me get better by identifying them.
And one of the reasons I bird, I kind of copied Hudson again as well. Obviously, the connections, like I mentioned before, not just with nature, but with other people. I mean, obviously, I know Hudson through birding, but I know a lot of other students that I've worked with over the years through birding. You know, my mentor got me through birding, but also connected with myself, thinking about like the mental health piece, being able to spend time alone in nature. You know, I love taking groups of kids out birding and I love taking students out, but the most birding I do is actually done by myself, spending time on my own, studying, being in nature, being present in nature. I think it's really important. It's also an academic exercise that never ends, meaning I'm always studying. I'm always learning more. I got my whole bookshelf here behind me of piles and piles of books that I can refer to and often do to learn more about the birds I want to see. It's a never ending game. You keep not just a life list, but I keep a Pennsylvania state list. I keep a New Jersey state list. I keep a bunch of Pennsylvania county lists that are pretty serious. And for me, birding is the ultimate teaching tool, which takes us to present day trailblazers. Before COVID struck, we were doing a lot of work with this program in Garnet Valley School District. Shout out, go Jags. This program, Trailblazers, a program that I was lucky enough to start when I came to our elementary school, first as just a substitute teacher. I was kind of given the keys to our nature trail that we have at our school to kind of help manage the land, but also find ways to engage students with nature. And this is a picture of Trailblazers. In fact, I believe this was the first session you ever attended, Hudson. Is that true?
Yep.
And want to point yourself out here to the gang?
I'm the guy with the yellow Gap sweatshirt.
Got it. And, you know, back when we, you know, when COVID-19 wasn't doing its thing, we were out on the nature trail almost on a weekly basis with Trailblazers in an after-school club format. But Trailblazers also blossomed into being a summer camp, which unfortunately we never got to get Hudson on because of this COVID happening here. But when it comes to the summer camp aspect of Trailblazers, you know, it's not just birding. It's because when I was thinking about myself getting into nature, I didn't start with birds. I moved into that. And I don't think there's any bad way for people to enjoy nature as long as they're respecting the natural resources. So we do more than birding. We'll go out canoeing. We'll go out kayaking, rock climbing. We'll, of course, take kids to local birding spots. But it's just as much about getting students connected to each other as it is about getting students showing and connecting them to the natural world. And here's a great shot of Hudson in action with Bird Club here. How about that?
Nice.
So when it comes to showing students the natural world, we actually have a nature trail at our school, Bethel Springs Elementary School. And we do a lot of programming to get students out there to see stuff. For instance, birds like white-throated sparrow, which this is my picture of white-throated sparrow, which I'm looking here at one color morph of the species. And then Hudson, you want to tell them about your picture?
Yeah, this is a darker morph, almost like a female.
And where'd you take this picture?
First State National Historic Park in Beaver Valley.
I was going to say that's one of your spots that you like to go to.
Yeah.
So white-throated sparrow, for the Pennsylvania people here, this is a bird that's only found in our area in winter. So one of the best parts about having the Trailblazers Birding Club and teaching students about birding is that a kid that signs up for it in the fall will still learn more about different birds when they sign up in the spring versus those who sign up in, you know, in other times of the year. There's always different things to see. Like this is a bird you only see in the spring session, the gray catbird, or as Hudson beautifully photographed here, the common yellowthroat. Tell us about this photo, Hudson.
Well, this photo, I believe, was taken at John Hines National Wildlife Refuge. The place, in spring and summer, has many different types of warblers, but this is the one that one of only a few that will stay all summer.
So not only do we love getting students connecting with nature, we love getting them up close with nature as well. And we do that. We actually have bluebird boxes all over our school's campus that we maintain throughout the winter and then springtime to get bluebirds nesting at school. And you can see this is a photo of the gang after we cleaned out one of our nest boxes to prepare for the spring. And we even had a nesting pair of bluebirds in that box this past year, which was pretty cool. One of the other things we love about Trailblazers is letting students be the teacher. You know, I teach all day. So whenever a student wants to volunteer with the club and come back and work, I love it. In fact, this is a student, James. He's now at the middle school. He's aged out of the elementary school Trailblazers, but he came back on a volunteer basis to work with the students and to be a teacher himself. And he actually planned a bunch of activities for the students. He made this birding slideshow with pictures of the birds, with facts about them, and led a game with the students to review the birds we learned about at Trailblazers. So for me, being a teacher, when students are the teacher, it's like, that's the money right there. I love stepping back and watching them do their thing and really applying themselves. And I love this next picture because you can see, note this bird on this picture here. Hudson, what kind of bird is that?
Eastern Towie.
Which is funny because in the picture of the reaction here, Hudson's team in the back is the only one with the correct answer on the board, which I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah, we won that. We won. We did every single. We completed every single answer. And we got it right. And my team just relied on me the whole time to get the answer right.
Well, what was the reward that you got?
Candy.
That's right. The kids love their candy like that. So that's just another thing I love about being able to use birding as a teaching tool through Trailblazers. You know, get the students to step up now and again and let them be the teacher. But then we also get unforgettable moments, much like when Hudson and I go out birding, or I go out with my birding friends, and we see a lot of cool stuff. Sometimes completely unexpected things happen. Like one day we did a hawk watch. We go to the bleachers, we grab our binoculars and camera, we sit and we look up at the sky, and you get cool passing birds of prey. Like this is turkey vulture flying over the school that I photographed on this day. Also can get red-tailed hawk. This actually is an immature red-tailed hawk. You can tell because the tail is not quite red yet. It's brown with light banding on it, kind of those brown stripes, if you see that. So you get red-tailed hawk growing up, but then unforgettable moments. How about a bald eagle over the parking lot at school?
First day.
That's right. First day of club. And remember, Hudson, we went out there. It was one of the first birds we got to see, the bald eagle flying overhead. Everyone got to see it. Even the principal came running out of the school. I shot him a text message. He was like, yo, get out here. Bald eagle. He came running out of the building. He borrowed my binoculars and even got to see the bird for himself. So that was a pretty, so like, even still, the students who are part of that club, every time I see them and we talk about old times, it's one of the things everyone always talks about. Like, man, remember that bald eagle? It's like, yeah, that's, again, an unforgettable moment and a lot of happy campers here. So Hudson, do you have any particular moments in Trailblazers you want to highlight here?
Well, pretty much every day in Trailblazers was pretty awesome. Definitely that day at Trailblazers where I saw yellow-bellied sapsucker and brown creeper. Wearing your jacket in this photo. Yeah.
Unprepared. I had to get you bundled up because it was pouring rain in this. So when it comes to Trailblazers, you know, for me as a birder, you know, this is an opportunity for me to be a birding mentor here again. And it's not just for Hudson, for all the students here, but again, having Hudson being a student who was into birding before he was a Trailblazer student, he's very tenacious about being out in the field and seeing new birds. And for he and I, birding has done so much for us during the pandemic here. I mean, when the shutdown happened back in March, I mean, everything closed, but one of the few things that stayed open was nature, local parks. In fact, for a time, it was one of the only things that you could really go out and do. And the best part was that the birds didn't seem to know what was going on. They were still business as usual, migrating through. And since birding could be done alone or outside, you can take COVID-19 precautions and get outside and connect with nature. So, Hudson, what do you say we rattle off some of our favorite moments of birding back in the COVID era, shall we?
Yes.
All right. So listen, my friend, I want you to take it away. And why don't you take us down? Why don't we go a little further away today to get things started, shall we?
Yeah.
Where are we going?
North Carolina.
There we are.
Okay, so this is Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge in North Carolina. This was definitely an unforgettable place. The best thing that I saw there was probably the red-headed woodpecker. And I have a little story about this red-headed woodpecker. So one day, me and my dad were walking down down trail in North Carolina, and we walked towards a tree down the path, and I saw two birds. One was a nice black and white, gray colored bird, but the other one, like in this picture, had a beautiful cherry red head, which I instantly thought red-headed woodpecker. And me and my dad got so excited as more and more started to come out. And that was definitely an unforgettable moment during the pandemic.
And I love that you point out the red-headed woodpecker because it's got that beautiful cherry red, just like you said, so wonderfully. And red-headed woodpecker is a good bird to teach people because a lot of folks often confuse the red-bellied woodpecker with what bird, Hudson?
They confused the red-headed woodpecker with the red-bellied woodpecker.
Did I say red-bellied by accident just now?
Yeah.
Oops. All right. Well, there you go. So I love talking about the red-headed versus red-bellied woodpecker because, not very convenient. The red-bellied woodpecker has red on its head, but a very different bird. In fact, red-bellied woodpecker, very common here in Pennsylvania, but red-headed woodpecker, pretty rare in Pennsylvania. Much more common in southern states. Red-bellied woodpecker get their name not because of the red crest on their head, but if you look in that right-hand picture, you can barely make out the little tiny red on the belly between the legs, which you might say to yourself, how on earth did that bird get named that? Well, before people had binoculars, they used to go out birding with rifles and shotguns. And they used to kill the birds and look at them. And when they would shoot and kill a red-bellied woodpecker, they'd hold the dead bird in their hand on its back, and they would see the red belly first, which is how the bird got its name, which is wacky because the red-bellied woodpecker's belly is barely red at all. But I love showing this story here. And, it's funny, too. Red-headed woodpecker is rare to the area. I just got a message from someone on Instagram today who actually lives in our school district right near Booth's Corner, and he has a red-headed woodpecker in his backyard. So I may be heading there one day this week after school if that bird sticks around because I need to see one for my Delaware County list still. So Hudson, where do we want to go next here? We have more birds to talk about, don't we?
Yeah, we're gonna stay in North Carolina, but we're gonna go to a different national wildlife refuge.
Is it this one right here?
Yep. Pea Island National Wildlife Refuge. Probably one of the best birding places I've ever been to. I had at least 7 or 8 lifers there, which was definitely a big moment for me.
Do you want to talk about some of these birds here that you have?
Yes. This bird was definitely unforgettable, the white ibis. The one on the left is a immature, as you can see, more of a grayer head and neck, and the one on the right is a beautiful, like pearl white body. These two were standing on a dead tree out in the open, which I accidentally went into a restricted area where they were, which when I came back, had about 30 ticks on my leg. So
Ooh.
I didn't want to go back in there.
Lesson learned.
Yep.
Now, was this the only great bird that you had there at Pea Island?
No. We had another 8 or 9 others. This bird, a ruddy turnstone, a beautiful red, black, white, and gray. It was one of the smaller sandpipers that were there, but definitely stood out in the hundreds of sandpipers that gathered on the beach there. And these are other birds that I saw at Pea Island. This was all these birds on this page were at the beach. The one in the top left corner, a willet, a very common sandpiper along the East Coast. And the one at the bottom left, sanderling, another very common one along the East Coast. We had a few groups of them walking along the beach. And an American oyster catcher at the top right corner. This was only a few of them were there, about 2, but that was also a lifer for me. And the one at the bottom right corner, a short-billed dowitcher, a beautiful and probably one of my favorite birds I saw there.
I really love, it's like today, I love that this gets you excited to go outside.
Yeah.
And I think especially today, it's like, I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and a lot of them are, really getting into their gaming, and to get them outside. So I really love that this gets you excited to go outside. Oh, also, an old colleague of mine with the National Audubon Society just joined in, and she was the lead educator for our chapter in South Florida. So Kim, any questions that you want to ask to Hudson or Mr. BQ, please?
Oh my gosh, when it comes to birding, I have so many questions. Every time I'm really fortunate because I live on a small farm. So I have a pair of barred owls that are breeding and live here. So every evening they talk to me, and sometimes they sit out my window, and you know how their calls go from, woo to and then I had some breeding sharp-shinned hawks. And the 3 babies, the 3 fledglings, we watched them learning to fly, and it was really wonderful. And I'm just wondering, I love the fact that you're out there and you're doing this, because when you're out there, not only are you seeing the birds, you get to see the bugs that are around too. I've become a bit of an entomologist. I think in my older age, I get excited about bugs too. But so in your travels, do you try and get out every weekend and go out and identify? Or do you go out and then just happens that the birds now catch your attention?
Well, it's more of like, I like it. I don't have to travel to get excited about birds.
Yeah.
I go out in my backyard, which we live like right in probably the most wooded part of Chad Ford. We have a river, and I'll get excited anyway. Like this morning, I had a red-breasted nuthatch in my backyard, which got me really excited.
Mhm.
And when I get out traveling, I'll get like these beautiful birds like scarlet tanagers. And either way,
yeah.
yeah.
Very cool. So now when you do your vacations with your folks, do you go places, you stay to the natural area so you get to see birds and collecting identifications?
Yes. I do I'll sit out, like when we go on vacation, just sit out at the apartment and just like watch as the birds like behave in their natural habitat and how they treat it. Yeah.
do you have a favorite? I'm sorry, I don't mean to hog all the questions. Do you have a favorite species or a group of birds, group of species, Janice, that you
Yes.
like? What's that?
My favorite group of birds are warblers.
Oh. See, now that's when I start going, I remember when we went, you might remember this, Francisco, one of the first times we went on the bird, what do we call the birding day? In Audubon? Birdathon, that's right. And there's all these wonderful little birds around. I remember looking at Mark Krause, who is his dad, his wife's husband, dad wrote the Audubon ID book. And I asked him, I'm like, so do you know what that is? And he goes, it's an LBB. And I'm like, what? Little brown bird. There's so many of the little ones that I get fascinated with, but I don't know. I have, I've moved here 3 years ago and I'm finally unpacking. So I found my siblings book, but you might know what this is. It was a beautiful little dove gray and green breasted little, so that's when I get confused between flycatchers, gnatcatchers, warblers, but it was just this delightful little bird that flew into the window. And he lived. I ran out on the roof and got him and just sat with him until I was afraid that maybe his neck was broken. And equine body work. And I thought, well, if I can fix horses, maybe I can fix the bird. And after a little while, he came back and he kind of did his neck and checked it. And he was like, oh, it was okay. And then I put him down. I said, just hang out here. And it was so cool. For about 45 minutes, he hung out with me. And then I finally saw that he was okay. And I said, we'll go, if you're okay, go fly away. And he did. And it was just a wonderful experience. And have you had some up close personal experiences with birds now? Can you tell me about one?
Yes. One was a very sad one I had was with a song sparrow. But it was last year. I come outside, we're going out for school, and I see a tiny brown bird sitting on our porch. I believe it was dead, but I studied it for a while, and I felt really bad for it, so I kind of gave it some respect, and I kind of like buried it under one of our holly bushes, which probably one of our favorite plants we had.
That's good.
Yeah.
And it's sad as it was probably fascinating to be able to look closely at the designs on the wings and how the feathers go together. It's which we don't usually get an opportunity to do.
Yeah, and to have that very intimate experience with just the circle of life as a young man. That's beautiful, Hudson. Thanks for sharing. And Kim, thanks for your questions. I'm so happy you're here, and I'm so happy you got to meet this guy. I've been talking to Kim about you, Hudson, for a little while. So yeah, that's one thing in Synergy that we aspire to do is build bridges and connect people from all over the globe to support one another and share more stories together. And Kim's an instrumental part of my life, so I'm really glad she's here and she got to meet you, Hudson. Yeah, keep flowing, Mr. BQ. What you got?
Well, we're definitely going to make it to Hudson's backyard shortly here to see some of these birds. But Hudson, why don't we tell them about the most recent chase that you and I got to do?
Sedren.
That's right. So we went to this place called Kirkwood Preserve, which is actually not very far from our school district and not far from where I grew up. So me being a very serious birder growing up in Chester County, I'm obsessed with birds in Chester County just because I lived there for so long. And when you keep a list of birds, you can keep your life list of all the birds you see in your life. You can keep your state list, which I keep a pretty serious Pennsylvania one, but my Chester County list is very serious. I've seen 266 species just in Chester County. And sedge-wren is actually a pretty rare bird to the county. So when one showed up, Hudson and I decided to make a trip over, and there's Hudson there. And then next to him is my friend Ross, which if you think Hudson and I have seen a lot of birds, My friend Ross's life list is over 6,000 birds.
Wow.
Yeah, he's a pretty wild dude. He and his wife travel all over the world. They actually keep a website called budgetbirders.com where they go to remote parts of the world to look for birds that have, some of them have never even been photographed for science before. They're like very hardcore. So when Ross said, "Hey, I want to help you guys find the sedge wren," I said, "Please." But Hudson, we had some mixed results with the sedge wren, didn't we?
Yep.
What was the challenge we ran into?
Height.
Height. So the view that I had was more like the bird on the right. This is the same bird, but Hudson's view, yours was more like the one on the left, because unfortunately the bird stayed low in the grass, and the grass was just as tall as you were, Hudson, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So, you
To
know,
that.
one of the downsides that happens here, but soon enough we'll be able to get hopefully the sedge wren to come out a little better for you. But this is a big deal bird, because prior to this bird used to nest in Chester County until 1948, when the habitat started to turn over and not be ideal for them. The next confirmed observation was in 2014, which I was lucky enough to get to see. And when the sedge wren again showed up in just a few weeks ago, Hudson and I, we had to get over there to get a look at that. Just because it was a special bird in Chester County. And not long before that,
Oh,
PowerPoint is closed.
I don't mind going back to the owl, but
Yeah.
that's when we got to get piggybacks into to help the viewing. You can put them on your shoulders.
Yeah, right. Seriously. Let me try this again real quick here, getting this back up here.
Yeah.
Hold, please. Hey, Hudson, you want to tell them about the Hudsonian godwit in the meantime, your bird?
Yeah. Okay. So the Hudsonian godwit, as you kind of hear its name, it's kind of like my name, was a very cool bird to see. It was actually right at a in the pond of a roadside farm. But there was more than just Hudsonian godwits. There was another big rarity there, which I also got to see, stilt sandpiper.
And I love the Hudsonian godwit because that was a big deal for me. And actually, I found out about the Hudsonian godwit through a rare bird text service. That's right. Such a thing exists, that there's rare bird alert text groups you can join, and people can kind of shout out when rare birds show up. So when we got a chance to see the possibility of a Hudsonian godwit, does everyone see the Hudsonian godwit?
Yes.
Yeah, I grabbed my siblings.
Nice.
Nimble on her feet here. So the Hudsonian godwit was a big deal because prior to that in Chester County, which is where we got to see this bird again, another great Chester County bird, the previous records of the species, amazing to note here, October 10th, 1974, October 13th, 1985, October 11th, 1993, and then the day that I took that photograph a second ago, which is from this scene here, was on October 3rd, 2020. So all records from October, the fourth ever for the county, the last one being in 1993. Hudson and I both knew it was kind of a big deal bird. We had to get out to see Hudsonian godwit. Plus, your name's in it.
Hey, that's very cool.
Had no choice there. So when it comes to other birds, Hudson's lucky. You know, I live in like I said, I live in South Philly near the stadiums. I have to travel to go see birds because I don't have any really good birding right here in my backyard. But Hudson, what do you say you tell us about some of the great birds of your yard?
Yeah. Like I get lots of I get a few pine siskins in the winter a lot. Also there's they've been traveling in big groups this year.
Okay.
Also purple finches, which definitely were a big bird for me this year. I've been getting a lot at my feeder. White-breasted nuthatch, one of the most common birds you can find up here in Pennsylvania. Ruby-throated hummingbirds, which you can get through spring migration and summer, which I have a few hummingbird feeders, which we got a lot this summer.
But Hudson, what is the best bird you've had at your feeders?
It has to be the evening grosbeak.
Ah,
Dude.
This bird was a few weeks ago. A group of 6 to 10 of them came, which a bunch of birders started coming to my house. That includes Mr. BQ, which only a few got to get the bird.
Dude. Sorry, this keeps happening to my screen for some reason. It keeps disconnecting here, but
It's all good. Did you take that picture, Hudson?
Yeah, I took both of those.
Oh, those are beautiful pictures.
Very nicely.
One of the things that when I was working at the National Audubon Society, one of the things that I got really stoked about was finding ways to introduce more like Latinos and more African American populations to birding. And one of the really cool things we did was it was in the anniversary of the Everglades National Park. We did a photography contest. And we were able to get, my job was development, which is fundraising, writing grants and stuff like that. And bringing business leaders in the area together to talk about the Everglades ecosystem and how, as business leaders, they can be involved and contribute to improving this ecosystem that's vital to South Florida. And, for me, it's like everything's connected. So it's the world. And we were able to get a lot of really little, cameras for the young people. And then we went out and got buses and we bussed out to the Everglades and took some really wonderful pictures. And then we did this birdathon that Kim referenced, in which a lot of the business leaders, and local kind of politicos jumped on a bus along with a lot of bird nerds and ornithologists, and Mark Strauss kind of leading the way, as well as Stuart Straw. And we went out and Frank Peterman, which, I hope you guys get to talk to him one day. And I remember being on the bus and all of a sudden stopping underneath this median because someone saw a really cool bird and everyone like gets out of the bus with their binoculars. So I find, pictures and photography is such a beautiful way to engage young people in birding. So I guess through birding, you've also become a photographer, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
I first started out with my mom's camera,
Uh-huh.
and then for my birthday this year, I got a even better camera. The one I used to have was only 135 millimeters. Now I have a 210 millimeter camera.
Wow.
Nice.
Very nice.
And it's funny with these evening grosbeaks, I got the message from Hudson's mom, hey, we have evening grosbeaks at the feeder. And I kind of knew that they were locally starting to show up from their northern range. And I was like, holy smoke. So I told a bunch of my birding friends, most of them got over to see them. And then the days in which I was teaching all day. So I went after school, not one day, but 2 days. And both days, the birds were there all morning. And then like the hour before I got there, they left. So the evening grosbeak is what we call a nemesis bird for me. One that is one that you go after time and time again and keep missing. And I'm so jealous. I was so happy and so proud of Hudson to have these amazing birds in his yard, but I was so jealous. Still am.
But did you make it to his yard though?
Yeah, I went twice after school, and both times there were birders already waiting there that had been hoping to get them as well. It was really funny. It's like back to that connectivity piece of birding. You send out the rare bird alert, and people will show up.
Yeah, they showed up.
Yes, they
It was
did.
pretty cool to see though, and Hudson was loving that. He had a lot of people in the birding community come out to view these birds, and it was like his home bird. So
How many people showed up? I'm curious, to your house.
15.
15. That's awesome. That's so cool.
yeah, it was
And
cool.
a lot of those birders that know Hudson now from this bird, a lot of them actually already knew who Hudson was from going to our favorite Philly birding spot, a place that I would say is just as much of like a social hang as it is a birding location, John Hines National Wildlife Refuge. And I love this picture on the left. There's Hudson. I showed you earlier that picture of the big boardwalk all wrapped up from Hurricane Floyd. There's Hudson on the new big boardwalk with a great egret.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a great egret. And can you talk a little bit, you've referenced Heinz Park a bit, both of you guys have. Can you talk a little bit about the park itself? Like has just the environmental impact like in the park, and like is there like what the local communities are doing to maintain the park? Is there any kind of issues that the park is come across or anything like that? Or is it all rosy?
Well, one of the problems is trash.
Okay.
People throw trash all over John Hines. I don't know why, but they have conservation groups that come out, go into the marshes, go into the trails and pick up all this trash. But also just people who visit John Hines bring some trash bags and do the same, even though they're not even in a conservation group.
Okay, so you've seen like a lot of local kind of community people come out and do cleanups.
Yep.
Right on. Cool.
That's cool. If you're out, when you see them and then they're cleaning up, you can point out birds to them, and you're going to open up a whole new world to them. And you share.
And it's funny, Hudson's made quite a name for himself at John Hines this past spring by just pointing out really good birds and finding awesome stuff. Like I said before, the birding community, John Hines in Pennsylvania is one of, if not the highest species count of any location in the entire state of Pennsylvania. So when it comes to birding in Philly, anyone who comes from out of town, if there's only one place that they can go birding, they will go to John Hines. And you know, you go there and most of Philadelphia birding community will go to Hines just to go birding for fun, but also like the big names and a lot of people from all over the US will come to John Hines. In fact, when I was in high school, I actually, my mentor, Brian, took a bunch of my friends and I down to John Hines because the author of this book that got me into birding, Ken Kaufman, Guide to the Birds of North America, I actually brought the book to John Hines that day. And he's a world-renowned birder. And he actually signed my book when I was a kid at John Hines. So when it comes to like birding, Hines is like, everybody knows Hines. It's like the best spot. And the fact that Hudson and I live so close to it, I don't think you could ever go there enough, but we're so incredibly lucky to have this spot because it's frankly, as you said, Hudson, filthy with birds. Would you say that?
Yep.
This
Filthy
is one of your
birds.
pictures, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And who is John Hines? Sorry, like I don't understand the historical reference to this guy. All I know is Heinz's ketchup. Is that?
Yeah. So John Hines used to, well, he passed away a couple years ago. It used to be called Tinicum National Wildlife Refuge because the area in which it's located is Tinicum Township in Delaware County. John Hines was a big conservationist and environmentalist, and he was a senator, I believe, and he actually perished tragically in a helicopter accident. He was flying over a school and another helicopter flew above it and they collided and he died in this horrible, horrible incident. But his wife is Teresa Carey Hines, who I believe is now married to John Carey. And John Hines, he was a big conservationist. So when he passed away, they ended up naming the refuge after him in his honor.
Cool. Yeah. And also, this photo I took of a barn swallow. The barn swallows. This is like the spot for nesting. Like, if they find this place, they will nest there. But they don't nest in the nest boxes. They'll nest under the boardwalk and in the reeds.
Okay.
Now, before we go on, a quick question to Francisco and Salim here. Are we able to keep going? I know it's supposed to end at 2:30. We only have a few more slides left, but.
Okay, yeah, we can keep going for sure, Brian. And I'd also love to leave a little space for people to ask questions because that's where a lot of the good stuff happens as well.
Yeah. All right, Hudson, let's burn through a bunch of these slides and get to the really good part. How's it sound?
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, so here's a barn swallow, beautiful bird. Black and white warbler is a bird we've seen together at John Hines.
Mm-hmm.
Hermit thrush, this is your lifer hermit thrush, wasn't it, Hudson?
Yeah.
Pretty amazing to get to see that.
Right.
You know, you look up at the sky at Hines. I mean, the bird diversity is so amazing. They have nesting Cooper's hawk that we actually walked by the nest a bunch of times and saw the birds sitting on the nest, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And you told me about this bird. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you found this, remember?
Mm-hmm.
And then I ran into you and your dad at Hines before we really had started to know each other more. And I was like, oh, you had a great horned owl there, and you gave me the inside scoop. And I went over and got to see it myself. So thank you again for that. Definitely awesome. And this is another great bird we got to see, bird like scarlet tanager, but it wasn't the only tanager that we got to see this past spring at Hines. Hudson, you want to tell them about this bird?
Yes, we got to see a summer tanager more than once at Hines. This bird is rare for Pennsylvania. Like this photo Mr. BQ took, it's in its molting plumage right now, which at the end of when it's done molting, it will be a beautiful red like it is right now. But as you can see, it has a little yellow on it. That yellow will soon turn into a beautiful light red.
That photo, I have to say, is just stunning. The colors, then anyway, I'm enjoying that picture very much.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
And it was cool getting to see summer tanager because it's a species that they nest all over the southern United States, but they're starting to expand their range more north. But they typically don't really nest in the state or even occur in the state. You have scattered records throughout, but this is the first record of summer tanager in Philadelphia County for a long time. And I actually went 3 times to John Hines to look specifically for this bird and kept missing it until finally I got to see it.
Really nice.
Which was awesome. And you know, it's funny, on the same day that we went to see a bird called the least bittern, which remember we got to see this sitting on the nest?
That's such a photo.
It was pretty crazy to see that, but it turns out the least bittern wasn't even one of the best birds that we got to see when we were at Hines. In fact, there's a picture right there of Hudson in the bottom right-hand corner looking up with his buddy Jackson into the trees to look for the summer tanager and along with a couple other cool birds. And you know, we got to see this yellow warbler together, but Hudson, this wasn't the best warbler we got to see at Hines this year, right?
It was the Prothonotary warbler. The Prothonotary warbler that me and you saw, and Jackson too, was probably the best bird we've seen at Hines this year. So that me and Jackson and BQ were walking like down one of the paths, and then we turn the corner and then we see 2 beautiful tiny birds in the trees. But BQ called them yellow warblers. But when I looked through my binoculars, I noticed that they were definitely not a yellow warbler, and they were Prothonotary warblers. And when I told BQ and Jackson, we all couldn't believe it, which we were all so excited. Then suddenly they all just flew away, both of them. But we were determined to go look, get more proof. So we went behind the porta potties. So, and we just pished, waiting for the bird to come out. But we did get a recording of this it singing, but we were determined to get more than that. So we kept trying to pish it back here, but then suddenly a piece of poop falls on BQ's jacket. We believe it was the Prothonotary warbler who did it. So and then we and then suddenly right in front of us was the Prothonotary warbler. It was eventually getting up to a good 5 feet in front of us, and it was the best bird we saw probably at John Hines this year.
Hmm.
Wow. What a treat. Was it cold that day?
What?
Was it cold? I'm just noticed the birds all looked fluffed up. Was it cold that day?
No, it was actually in the middle of the summer. It
Oh,
was, I believe it was in late May.
Yeah, I believe it was May 23rd, which one of the reasons why this observation was so exciting is at that point, prothonotary warblers' migratory range is
Mhm.
usually early May. Typically, when you see them in the area, typically you actually see them late April, early May. The fact that not just one, but two were present in late May was a very good sign that this bird was not only still here, but it was a great sign that this bird was going to stay to nest. And we never got to confirm that it was nesting, but it was a really crazy instance where we got to see a really unexpected warbler, and the student got to correct the teacher. So I got to feel a little long in the teeth at that moment.
Yeah.
And then I got doo-dooed on by it. So
There, that what a blessing.
yeah. And again, back to those unforgettable moments of birding, that was one of them right there, to get to this prothonotary warbler so close and so clear. And I mean, to see a beautiful bird is one thing, but to see a beautiful bird come right in front of you like this for views like that, I mean, it was electrifying.
Yeah.
So when it comes to birding, I guess the big takeaway here, we're going to start kind of closing things out here. Like, how can you connect with birding? I mean, Hudson and I tell all these amazing stories, and there's going to be even more stories to tell down the road, I'm sure. But like for yourself, how can you connect with birding? Well, there's bird clubs in your area, I'm sure, on a county level, on a state level, a regional club. If you're here in the States, you can join the American Birding Association or the Audubon Society. There's groups of varying levels on social media for birds. There's a group called ID That PA Bird, which is meant for like beginners to post their photos and kind of learn about how to identify birds. And then there's one that spans all the way to the far extreme end called Pennsylvania chase birds, which are like rare birds to the area within the state of Pennsylvania that like you go after, that you can join any kind of group if you want to kind of learn about how to identify birds, or if you know them really well, where to find the rare ones. I'm actually going to give a quick plug to a group called Ornithotherapy here. It's a group on Facebook. A friend of mine, Holly Merker and Richard Crossley, started this group here, and it's all about using birding as a way to improve your mental health. That ornithotherapy is mindful observation of birds in nature. And the whole group is all about ways to get in touch with yourself while getting in touch with nature. So I can't recommend Ornithotherapy enough on Facebook. And then also you can buy yourself a field guide or a birding app. I recommend the Kaufman Field Guide to the Birds of North America because it's small. And this is the first edition, so it doesn't look like this anymore. But it's all photos. It's got all your range maps. It's got information about the birds. You can also use apps like iBird or Merlin Bird ID, which are great apps on your phone. Or you can even sign up for ebird.org to learn about what's being seen in your area. So there's a lot of ways you can connect with birding. To connect with Hudson and I, we have on the left, feathersandchirps.com, Feathers and Chirps on Instagram, or you can call Hudson's mother, which I didn't know you added it in there. That's amazing. I love that. And I'm on Instagram and YouTube called Birding with BQ. My low budget to no budget birding videos that I make. And I also have a Twitter that I usually like to post classroom updates from, and also some bird updates. And that's Mr. BQ Birds, because bird is indeed a verb. And Hudson, how do you feel right now?
Good.
Hopefully you feel accomplished.
Yes.
We've made it to the end.
Nice.
So
Beautiful.
congratulations, Hudson. We did it. Our first bird talk.
Yes.
Good job, guys. That was fantastic.
I hope you do it again.
Yeah, it'd be great to cultivate that space again. Maybe, it'd be nice to talk to Audubon Society, see also a way to involve these two fellows in a presentation.
Maybe Paul Gray again, and see if we can get him. I was just thinking how cool it would be to do a birding trip down there. If anybody ever comes to Florida, please come see me. I have cool birds in my yard. I had, when you were looking at the barn swallows, 2 weeks ago, we had them flying through and all over my pastures. They're just darting, and the horses are oblivious to it. And it was just such a show of flight. It was beautiful.
Yeah, I really love the relationship you guys have, between, mentor and student, and your ability to learn from your student, Mr. BQ. That says a lot about you, and, just passing on that same inspiration that Brian, your mentor, and that same enthusiasm that was passed on to you. I think it's just really important today that we maintain those types of relationships and engage more young people in a way that in birding is accessible. Like Hudson was saying, as far as trips, it's like I just kind of look outside or in the parking lot or right above my school. It doesn't need to be going down to the Everglades or going to the Amazon. It can be right there, right in your backyard. And it gets you more in tune with your environment and the ecosystem and sometimes the challenges that are taking place from the different weather patterns. I'm an avid surfer, so I associate it a lot to surfing. Like when there's like a swell, there's like different online chats that you go into to hear about the swell and how the microclimates are affecting the move of the swell of the ocean. I think there are a lot of similarities actually, but birding is a lot more accessible as far as like just looking outside, and then going to the next level is like buying stuff, and that can get pretty pricey itself. But I know, for me, I've been a lot involved in nonprofits and writing grants and getting those types of equipment for young people who wouldn't have the means, who's, sometimes, it's really sweet that you got such a supporting mom, and that you guys get to build together. Have you been able to have your sisters gotten hooked on birding yet or no?
Nope,
No, not yet.
I'm not interested.
Like that at all. Oh, also you guys, Hudson has a shop on his website. What do you have on your shop, Hudson?
Well, we have shirts, mugs, travel cups, hats, and sweatshirts,
Cool.
all made by my cousin.
Wow. And who's the designer?
What?
Who's the designer of the imagery on your shop?
The imagery?
Yeah,
mean-
like logo and like all that kind of stuff.
Me and my mom.
Right on. That's beautiful. Cool. So you guys definitely check out. Do you guys have any questions? Let's open up the forum for questions. Do you guys have any questions for Mr. BQ or Hudson?
I wore my Feathers and Chirps shirt just the other day. Just wanted to say that.
Thanks.
Nice. I want to say beautiful presentation one, and congratulations, Hudson. Really amazing to hear from you. I'm proud of you. That I know it's challenging talking to people, especially on Zoom. I do it all the time. It's hard for me oftentimes, and it was really great to hear your voice. So I'm proud of you. Congratulations. Yeah, keep trying to keep finding different ways to express yourself and challenging yourself. That's what a lot of us are having to do right now. So it's great to see you doing that. Beautiful imagery too, Jen. Jen does a lot of support with Synergy on our back end and the graphics. It looked really clean. Yeah, they mentioned that was you. So really nice presentation. Does anyone else have feedback or questions or inspirations? Yes, Dad, that's Dad.
I have two questions. You told us before, BQ, what kind of camera do you use?
So I have a Canon 7D Mark II and a Canon 400 millimeter lens. It's actually downstairs. I don't have it up here right now, but it's a big rig. It's like the lens is probably about this long, probably like a little more than a foot and a half maybe. And the camera body is pretty heavy. I have it's like a big shoulder strap I wear over it, but I wear that on one side and my binoculars on the other. And as far as like the camera goes, you don't have to be a birder and own a camera. Like the photography is kind of extra, but if you're really into, photography and you want to take pictures of birds, you can, or if you really like rare birds, it's one of these things that a lot of birding is on the honor system that, you know, you tell other birders, oh, I had evening grosbeaks at my feeder. And one of the things I love about Hudson and his birding is the fact that he, not only does he take it seriously, but the fact that he has a camera as a student really changes it, because a lot of grown-ups, having grown up a birder, a lot of grown-ups discount young people for stuff all the time. And as a birder, I was discounted all the time by people older than me with my observations. But the fact that Hudson not only has a camera, then takes a picture and he's like, oh, and I had evening grosbeak. Boom. Thank you.
Oh, that's actually my second question. Hudson, your passion and your excitement comes through as you're describing the adventures that you have had and the successes that you've had. So I was wondering, and you're how old?
I'm 10.
Amazing. Okay, so I was wondering where that passion and excitement comes from in you.
Well, first, I think my passion kind of came from, well, it was one person. I used to go to a nature camp at a like a conservation, like forest and wildlife center. There's a girl who was one of our like leaders or co-leaders for our group. She was a birder, and she like photographed, and that's kind of how I got into birding. And my passion and excitement came from like seeing the birds and their like natural beauty.
So what about seeing the birds and their natural beauty is so exciting for you personally?
Well, it's so exciting for me because, well, how I like love birding. It's awesome to see like new birds and all of that. And yeah, it's kind of like yeah, kind of almost like that.
Mhm. Thank you. Your presentation was wonderful.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Wow, amazing presentation, guys, and
Thank you.
beautiful photos. Yeah, I was so inspired. And, you know, I was loving the way that you were talking about how, you know, birding brings communities together and it gives people new inspiration and it encourages people to look at the world in different ways. And I thought that was wonderful. I used to live in the country, and one of my great pleasures, Hudson, I totally related to you when you were talking about the sounds, the different sounds that the birds make, because that's how I used to wake up every day. First one bird would chirp, and the next one would chirp, then there'd be a whole host of them. And then I'd wake up and go and watch them and drink my coffee in the morning, watching the sunrise. And I cultivated my garden. I built a pond and I planted flowers so that sunbirds would come, and ibis and all different things. And I've recently moved house, and in my new garden, which is in a much more built up area, there's only a pied wagtail and a crow. So I'm really missing the birds. But I never actually thought, for me, it was so inspiring to actually hear that, oh, you don't have to, like, you know, you were talking about how you can find them in your backyard, and that's great. But I never thought, oh, if they're not in your backyard, you can go out and look for them and connect with people that also like looking at birds and finding out about them and stuff, you know. So I think that's really wonderful for me as well. You know, I might go out and look for some now. So thank you.
Thank you.
Tara's tuning in from Nairobi area in Kenya. So she grew up with a whole spectrum of different birds, but it was great for me also too. I grew up in the US, I'm in Kenya, and I grew up in the Northeast. So visually, the photos were beautiful as well. I wanted to say that for both of you, really amazing imagery, and also kind of brought me back home visually to an environment, you know, the Northeast that, you know, where I was brought up in. So that was wonderful.
Very cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other feedback?
Hello, this is Dante. Hello, Hudson and BQ. Thank you so much, Mr. BQ and Hudson. You can't see me. I have my daughter with me, so I don't want to distract anyone. But I in Washington, D.C., excuse me, I invited a friend today that's with us that has a son, and she's very interested in birds, in the way that they have been able to, do bird feeders, and she showed me some beautiful pictures of the type of birds that come into her backyard. In the Washington, D.C. area, of course, we're a metropolitan area, so being able to get more diversity in nature, this is something that we're definitely doing in the that Francisco and Salim and a lot of the Synergy group are looking to do, and bringing more. Excuse me, everyone. Okay, cool. My daughter doesn't like me talking to others when she only wants my attention. So if you hear her whining, she doesn't want me talking to anyone but her, if you don't mind. Yes, I'm talking about you. All right, thank you much. But what I noticed is that there are quite a bit of people of different ethnicities that are close by. I'm in DC, so a ride to Philadelphia or Pennsylvania would be lovely for people that are living in the city and getting a chance to experience nature, especially at a young age of their 4-year-olds, their adolescents, earlier years. So I really appreciate you, Hudson, with
Yeah, I think Dante's mic's a little bit.
especially from, and I think, sorry about that. And I think that you will definitely be a leader, young Hudson, in connecting our youth and bringing more people to nature, my friend. So I hope to meet you from Washington, D.C. and bring some kids up to meet you very soon, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice too to have Hudson come down to DC. I've taken groups of young people in DC birding out at Rock Creek Park and also Anacostia Park. We did some really, I think the Australian Embassy sponsored that trip in Anacostia Park, and we did a cleanup after. And the Australian Embassy donated some cameras for the young people. And from Anacostia High School, Wilson High School, I think as well. But yeah, there's some beautiful parks down there to go birding in Washington, and there's some really beautiful museums that are free, so you can go hit that up afterward in a family trip.
I would
Dante saying that.
keep
Go ahead, Dante.
Yeah, let's figure out how we can make that happen. I think there's a lot of young people that would be interested in family, especially during this time of where everything's so separate. And I know you and Salim are working on that. So it's good to meet the both of you, PK and Hudson, because I really do hope to get kids to meet you all.
I love the idea of more young people leading programs.
Yeah.
Obviously with and then young people with the guidance and support of their mentors, like Mr. BQ. Well, I'm gonna pause the recording now, and really grateful for today's presentation and you guys taking the time, and oftentimes, like with these brilliant young minds, there's wonderful supportive parents that are there. So I really want to a big shout out to the wonderful, loving, supportive parents.